Change fixes the past, but transformation creates the future. Transformational change is radical and it's often dramatic. It differs from small incremental change and requires a shift in mindset, behaviour and ways of working. Transformational change requires a radical shift in behaviour that must be led by organisations' leaders with a focus on strategy, leadership and values. What I'd like to do today is to talk about the model that I use for organisational change. And in doing that, hopefully give you a sense of what you as leaders need to do to get your staff to change how they behave and how they work within your organisations. This is a model that was adopted from Telstra. I got this model back in the 1990s, but it's held true for me in my whole career. You need all of these elements of change to transform your organisation. If you leave any of them out, or you don't pay attention to any one component, your change will falter. So your journey needs to start with a pressure for change. Without any pressure for change, your change objective will just sit in the bottom tray. There is nothing that will drive it or make your staff commit to it. Cotter, in his 8-step transformational process, he talks about creating an urgency for change. For change to happen, you need to develop some sense of urgency or a burning platform that people will connect with. This helps spark the initial motivation and starts to get things happening. When you start your change process, you will always find forces against change. And I really like this quote by John Kenneth Galbraith. He's an economist. But when faced with a choice between changing and proving there's no need to change, most people get busy on the proof. You need to find the forces for change. So you need your burning platform. But as well, you need to make sure that the people who work with you believe that the change is worth the effort. It takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of effort to change how you behave, but also to change how organisations and the individuals in those organisations change. Most of you will be probably aware of the WIFM change management theory, the what's in it for me, and the belief that people will only change if there's a personal benefit for them. And I have found that staff respond to a broader concept of benefit than one of meeting their own self-needs. And that's a concept of change that's based on or a concept of benefit that's based on the customers, on the community and on their colleagues. I believe that we're not quite as self-centred as traditionally you would think. And that in the health industry, which I have worked all of my career, I believe that people are driven by their own self-actualisation, by the belief that what they are doing will improve things for the patient, for the community as a whole. And they're the things that you need to find. To create a pressure for change, you need to find the dissatisfaction with the current state. You need to find out if that's the team processes or the workload, how meetings are run, how people's roles are defined, whether they are specialists, whether they have career paths, and whether they are empowered in decision making. All of your organisations will have these. The pressure for change doesn't come from the fact that we're not achieving the budget or we're not achieving the 4-hour emergency target. It comes from those innate inner feelings that people have and that drive them to satisfaction. So we've created our pressure for change. We've got people involved. Now we need to define the vision, and a vision of the desired future state. Without a coherent and sensible vision, a change effort dissolves into a list of confusing and incompatible projects. And I'm sure you can all think back, particularly in the TQM days when we were all going to redefine our workplaces through projects. And there were hundreds of projects in organisations that in no way aligned to any vision or strategy. Your transformational process needs to align to your organisational strategy, and there needs to be a clear vision of where you are going. Without a clear vision, you won't be able to measure your progress, but also you won't be able to connect to the hearts and minds of those involved. A clear statement about the future situation helps gain genuine commitment. An understandable vision helps establish the milestones and monitor progress. A view of the future state should be customer focused. For us in our service, it should be focused around the patient, and the patient should sit in the centre of our journey. It should not just be one person's dream, but should be a commitment of the whole organisation. It should be challenging, and it should push you to the future. Transformation is about the future. It should be evolving and not static. No organisation stays the same, and as you learn and move on your journey, your vision should also change. It should be actionable, and it should be easy to understand by anyone who reads it. At this point, I'm going to talk about leadership. Leadership covers the whole gamut of this model, but at this point, leaders have a clear responsibility in how they deliver the vision, how they deliver the future state. And I'm sure you have all met inspirational leaders throughout your career. Very long time ago now, I did the Williamson's Community Leadership Program. And the thing I learnt about that is leaders come in all shapes and forms. They come as extroverts, and I would consider myself an extrovert, but they also come as introverts. But the things that they do bring in common are these things. They talk about why. They don't talk about the what or the how, but they talk about why are we doing this? Why are we taking this journey? Why are we making this effort? They let their passions show. They don't hide their emotions. And the passion, I think, is displayed in the language that you use, in how messages are communicated. Inspirational leaders embrace controversy. You don't shy away from a decision because it may be in the press. You don't shy away from the decision because people may not like it. You embrace controversy if it is to deliver your vision and help with your future state. And you have to have courage. And we need to walk the talk. When you are a leader in an organisation and you are leading significant transformation, everyone is watching you. And they are waiting for you to make a wrong step. The detractors in the process, the people who are wedded to the past, they want to find some way to make you fail. So you have to be consistent. Your language has to be consistent. Your behaviours have to be consistent. You have to be consistently sending the message and behaving appropriately. Most managers, and I say managers purposefully, work in the intellectual and the physical. Connecting the intellectual keeps us in our comfort zone. It isn't transformational. We achieve much greater results if we connect to the emotional and the spiritual. And we do this by telling stories. To build a commitment to change, you need to tell a story. You need to make it personal. It needs to be authentic. It needs to create a sense of us. And it needs to build in a call for urgency. At Eastern Health, as we went through our transformation, we redesigned our surgical services. So the surgical services went from 30 different surgical units to 10. The 10 units operated across the whole health service instead of individual campuses as it had previously. As part of this redesign, we brought the new heads of the unit, the 10 heads of the unit, and their business partners, their operational managers, to build some capacity. We invited them to a dinner where we did some work around developing our vision for the future, and we did some work around setting expectations around what their job was about. As we were doing this work was when I met Helen Bevan, and I talked to Helen about how could I get commitment from these surgeons. Surgeons traditionally distrust managers, They distrust the data that comes from administrators. People will tell you that a surgeon loves some data, but I can tell you that giving surgeons data does not bring their commitment. So she suggested I find a story and I tell a story. I'd never done this before. I took all my courage to stand before these surgeons, and instead of putting up my slide that said, these are the objectives of the day, we're going to build a vision and we're going to set expectation, I told a story. And the story I told was about a girl who died in the operating theatres. I'm not going to give you the detail, but I told them of how I had sat on the root cause analysis that looked at why this girl had died. I spoke to them about how it made me feel when I heard the young doctors, the registrars, talk about their experience, and one of those doctors who's not been able to come back to work. I told them about how I felt when I heard of the nurses who had been in the theatre on that day and how they could not go back into that theatre, the franticness of what they had to do. I told them about the letters that I had read from the father of this girl, who talked about losing the sunshine of his family. As I told this story, all of those surgeons were riveted. At the end of that story, when I told them that for me, that root cause analysis was an epiphany that told me why I come to work. I come to work so as I can build systems where those things don't happen to people. I come to work so I can make sure that the patients and the staff in the organisations I'm responsible for have a safe environment. Not one of those surgeons was not going to doubt my commitment, and not one of those surgeons was not going to buy into the change process. And we achieved amazing results from that transformation, and I believe it was based on that introduction and the story that I told. Okay, we've got pressure for change, we've got a vision for the desired state. Now we need to get on and do the real work. We need to build capacity in our organisation for change. A lot of people see building capacity as running some education, having a few information sessions, writing a policy, or sending a memo. Okay? You will not change performance, you will not change behaviours by running education. You will not change performance by writing a policy, and sending a memo usually ends up in the bottom drawer. You need to build the systems and processes that will allow people to engage in the change process. You need a clear strategy of how you are going to get to your destination. What are the clear, actionable steps in that strategy so people know what is expected and what they need to do? At Northern Health, we're just about to begin on a transformational journey, where we've started our journey, where we're going to redesign all of our patient flow to eliminate waste and improve the patient journey, to improve the care provided to our community. In building the systems and processes, we engage system experts. We make sure we have method experts in lean. Most of the people who we are going to ask to do this redesign are clinicians. They're doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, they're cleaners, they're accountants. Their core business is not having expertise in redesign methodology. What they come with is the knowledge of the process and the system that they work in, and what we need to do is to help them to take those systems and to improve them. So in the organisation that I'm working in at the moment, we're building up our own internal capacity around redesign. We have a dedicated redesign expert, and we will bring on some other people to help them to do process mapping and other tools. Okay, we've built our pressure for change, we've got a fantastic vision, really capable staff, we've introduced our change methodology. Now it's how do you reinforce and consolidate that. And I know I've worked in lots of organisations where we've introduced really significant transformation. I've left the organisation, other people have left the organisation, and that change has not been reinforced and it's not stuck. And you've gone through all of this effort to find that the old behaviours just revert. And this comes from William Bridges, who writes about change. So it isn't the change that does you in, it's the transitions. Change is situational. It's the new boss, the new technology, the new building. The transition is the psychological process people go through to come to terms with a new situation. And what you find is that organisations put a whole lot of effort up the front of the change process, a whole lot of effort in sending out the message, communicating the change, but then when it comes to the end, they don't put in the work that needs to happen to resolve that. You need consistent, visible, tangible reinforcement of change initiatives to make sure that the new ways are integrated into the way we do our work. When I started preparing for this presentation, I thought, well, 50% of change initiatives fail. I read somewhere 60%. In some reading I did yesterday, sadly, it's 70% of change initiatives fail. Without failure, without taking risk, you will not get success. And you need to accept that you're going to have to go back and redo things, that you will not get it right the first time. And there's lots of change methodologies, PDCA cycles, etc., that will help you go back and re-look at what you've done and progress your initiative. But you have to accept that not everything you do will be successful the first time. You have to give your staff permission to fail. You have to accept that they will fail and learn from that. And with that, you will then get much greater success. If people are fearful of failing, if they're fearful of making an error, they will not take the risks that are needed to be taken. And I think this is a risk conference and we're supposed to be minimising risk, but I really believe that you need to give people the imperative to go forth, explore new terrains and different ways to do things, and in doing that, there will be failures. The reason you need a clear vision is so as you know the journey you're taking and where you're going. Without that, there's no way you can design the measurement systems that will allow you to know if you're progressing. If you've just got a whole lot of random projects happening and all over the place that are not linked to a strategy, you won't know where you were going. So the clear vision really relates in the clear strategy and the measurements that you need to achieve your goal. At Northern Health, as we start our change process, we're designing an evaluation methodology. We're going to work with our university partners to develop a methodology that will be integrated into our processes so at every stage we can evaluate how we are performing. And when I come back to you in 2 years to talk about how successful my change process has been, I'll be able to put up the data, even though I'm trying to be in the emotional space, I'll put up the data that will show you that we have made a difference. And I've stood up at conference after conference and heard people speaking and, they've talked about the great work they've done, but there's no measurement and there's no way that they've evaluated that they have actually made a change. You need to develop into your process clear measurement of what you're doing. Without the measurements, you can't put in the corrective actions when things do start to go off track. You can't manage your progress. You can't motivate people to show them where they've been and where they're going. And you want to do that because you want them to celebrate their successes. You need the data to help them celebrate their successes. You need to think early in your process, what are you going to do about measurement and how are you going to measure your progress? I really like this slide that I got from Marion Stanway, who in the past worked for EY, runs her own consulting firm now. But all change is a cycle. And any of you who've been involved in major change processes will identify with some of these points. I'm a mass bands and fireworks person myself. That's really how I like to start a project. Lots of promotion, lots of excitement. Any project as it goes on, people will get tired, you don't see the results, you've got to put a lot of work in, people start questioning, and is it worth it? They push back to go back to the old ways. And you will find yourself waking up at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, in the long dark night of the innovator, when everything is bad. You're not meeting any of your targets, your budget's terrible, you can't get your teams to decide on what systems they're going to put in place. When you are in that space, things are about to improve. It's knowing when you're in that space is the problem because you don't know until you're on your way out of it. But things will eventually start to pay off. True transformation takes a long time. You really have to commit to it, and you have to ride through the difficulties of it. So I'll just finish with this quote from John Cotter, the change gurus. Over years, I have been convinced that we learn best and change from hearing stories that strike a chord within us. Those in leadership positions who do not grasp or use the power of stories risk failure for their companies and for themselves. Thank you.